It's meme time, it's meme time. Gather all your friends, it's meme time. It's meme time, it's meme time. The only cure for sadness.
In the flashback, she and Ichigo went to the same karate dojo. Ichigo was weak and would always cry whenever he lost a fight. However, whenever he saw his mother, he would immediately smile no matter what. Until one day, his mother died at only age 9. He stopped going to school. He stayed at the river where his mom died from morning to night, just simply searching for her. Meanwhile, as Tatsuki was telling the story to Ohime, Ichigo and his family were walking up a hill when out of nowhere Rukia was just standing there. Ichigo ends up talking to Rukia in private to see why she was there, in which Rukia makes the claim that it might have been a hollow that killed his mother. This angers Ichigo so much. He begins to scream at Rukia saying that it was not a hollow. However, as he screams this, he recognizes a strange girl on a hill and begins to chase her. As he collapses on the ground, Rukia catches up to him, in which he tells Rukia that it wasn't a hollow that killed his mother, but it was himself. Right after Ichigo says this, Rukia regrets everything. It is here where we receive the full story of Ichigo and his mother. He was unable to tell the difference between the living and the dead at a young age. One day after karate practice, he was walking home with his mother when a car drove by and splashed Ichigo. His mother wanted to switch sides with her, but he refused, saying he wanted to protect her from the water. After they walked a bit further, Ichigo noticed a girl with no umbrella, looking like she was considering to jump. Ichigo went to try and save the girl. You see, at first he only wanted to protect his mother, who was the center of his family's universe. But as time moves on, he wants to live to the meaning behind Ichigo, his name, which means one who protects. As he ran towards the girl, his mother follows and it results in her death. As Ichigo opened his eyes, the girl was gone and his mother was bleeding on the ground dead. He never saw what killed her, but he personally felt like he had torn the heart of his entire family's universe. As Ichigo stares at the grave longer, we get a chance to see Karin talking to this strange girl. The girl mentions that Karin can see her and hear her, and then mentions how tasty she looks. Karin can then immediately see the hollow behind the strange girl and she freaks out. Not knowing what to do, she yells at Yuzu to stay back. At the same time, Rukia senses the hollow before the order comes in, so she runs to Ichigo saying there's a hollow. They both run towards the hollow's presence, but while running, Ichigo asks Rukia if she was going to ask him about him killing his mother, and she replies that she will wait, and when he feels like talking or wants to tell her, she will listen. While they are talking, Yuzu and Karin are in a tight situation. Karin is being beaten up. Yuzu decided to run to try and help Karin, however the monster Yuzu can't see wraps a tentacle around her neck and is strangling her. About to eat Yuzu, Ichigo cuts the tentacle off and catches Yuzu. Him and the hollow fight for a bit when he recognizes the strange girl as the same girl he was trying to save. He yells, "Who are you? Are you the slave of that hollow? Is it controlling you?" The girl then replies saying neither, and transforms into this little weird hook-like thingy. Rukia explains his power, and it turns out the hollow can disguise this tail-like thing that's on its head like a person and use it to bait people. His name is Grand Fisher, and he has managed to outfight the Soul Society for 54 years. It was at this point that Ichigo realized the girl he was trying to save all those years ago was actually the decoy of this hollow. Before he can even finish his line of thought, he rushes to Grand Fisher in pure anger. They fight back and forth, and when Rukia tries to join in to help Ichigo, Ichigo looks at her and tells her to stay out of it, that this one is personal. Rukia then has a cold, emotional expression in her face as she says, "I'll take care of your sisters, don't die." Ichigo and Grand Fisher continue to fight back and forth, however, as it appears, Grand Fisher is way stronger than Ichigo, but Ichigo still refuses to lose. He has now realized that Grand Fisher is the one responsible for killing his mother, that his entire family has suffered because of this monster. He has the drive to kill this monster no matter what. But because of this attitude, Ichigo has been way too reckless. Grand Fisher grabs his sword and uses his nails to stab right into Ichigo's body. Grand Fisher begins to taunt Ichigo. As Ichigo grips his sword even tighter, Grand Fisher creates an exact replica of his mother in front of Ichigo and says it's all over. Ichigo is absolutely speechless in anger towards Grand Fisher. He is truly upset above anything at this point, but what causes the pure shock is when the bait he is up against says his name. Meanwhile, Rukia leaves his sisters in Kone's hands and rushes to go help Ichigo. However, as she runs to help Ichigo, she thinks about everything that Ichigo has told her. She thinks about how this is the first time Ichigo as a Shinigami is fighting for himself, and how if he wins because she helped him, he will never get over it. Then she remembers what they said. Stay out of it. This brings back memories of the past, some strange men who speak about honor. If you help him now, his life will be saved, but his honor will be damaged forever, is what this mysterious man in white clothing said. The figure also says that there are two kinds of battles, fighting to preserve life or fighting to preserve honor. After remembering this, Rukia realizes that she has to stay out of it, but she is now extremely worried about Ichigo. Seeing Ichigo's mother makes Ichigo even more angry as he refuses to allow Grand Fisher to defile her memory. As he grips his sword ready to attack, Grand Fisher uses Misaki's words and body as a shield against Ichigo. This causes Ichigo to pause for just a moment. However, Grand Fisher uses this moment to rip his arm through Misaki and into Ichigo's stomach. However, this is exactly what Ichigo wanted, as Ichigo grabs a hold of Grand Fisher's arm and cuts Grand Fisher down with his Zanpakuto. A few minutes pass by and Grand Fisher transfers his badly damaged body into his decoy having the face of Ichigo's mother. Then he uses that to escape as Ichigo is far too hurt to stop him. Following that, Ichigo collapses onto the ground with all of his injuries. Ichigo was far too hurt to be healed after this battle. In fact, it took everything from Rukia just to heal the massive hole inside of his chest. After the battle, Ichigo was mentally drained. He viewed the battle as a loss, as he had failed to kill Grand Fisher. He immediately goes to his mother's grave, apologizing that he could not avenge her death. Sulking at her grave, his dad shows up smoking a cigarette when Ichigo asks Isshin why he doesn't hold Misaki's death against him. He failed to protect her. He was unable to do a single thing to save her. He continues by saying how he cannot understand why nobody blames him when it was all his fault. He wished everyone hated him. Isshin responds with a smile and says Misaki would be mad at him if he did that, and that it was not Ichigo's fault that Misaki had died that night. He was proud of her. She protected Ichigo with her life. Isshin continues to cheer Ichigo up as he walks away. After Isshin leaves, Ichigo looks up at Rukia and tells Rukia that no matter what, he wants to continue to be that Shinigami, so that he can become strong, so that he can protect people, so that he can kill that monster. And while this happens, we skip to the Hollows removing Grand Fisher's mask, completely changing his appearance. The following day, Ichigo and Rukia drive Kon to leave the house through their abusive actions. Soon after, Kon enters the world and attempts to find a girl to take care of him. He fails, gets stepped on, and goes back to Ichigo's house to only get a makeover from Ichigo's sister. He then just runs to Ichigo's room and apologizes to Ichigo, who had not even realized that he had ran away. After this fantastic occasion, Ichigo's sister and father slowly become addicted to this new TV show about a spirit man named Don Kanoji. Ichigo is definitely not a fan of the guy and ends up going to school to only find out that all of his friends have become addicted too. People talk to each other and Don Kanoji is actually visiting Kamakura Town, so Ichigo goes to the event for his family, and out of nowhere, Chad, Ichigo, Ohime, Karin, Tatsuki, and Rukia hear screams of a demi-hollow. Rukia explains to Ichigo that the demi-hollow's soul is bound to the hospital, and how he is not a hollow yet, and won't for months on end, as long as no one damages the hole. However, as she explained this, Don Kanoji arrives and stabs his cane directly into the demi-hollow's hole. Pause. Don Kanoji believes he is passing the hollow into the afterlife, but in reality he is turning the demi-hollow into a full-fledged hollow. Rukia realizes what is going on, and Ichigo tries to stop him, but the security guards catch him, and as Rukia tries to jump and turn him into a Shinigami, she is captured as well. Everything appears to be hopeless, however Kisuke pokes Ichigo out of his body by using his cane. Together, Don Kanoji and Ichigo, using each other's abilities, manage to defeat the hollow. However, as Kanoji begins to cheer for their victory, the hollow returns to almost what his human form looked like, and Kanoji starts having a mental breakdown. He cries after realizing everything here was his fault, that he did not free the spirit. However, Ichigo ends up cheering Don Kanoji up and makes him once again happy. The next day, the squad was in massive trouble at school because they were stuck in the principal's office being lectured about the event that took place at the Don Kanoji festival thing. They end up escaping thanks to Rukia's distraction, and right after school, Don Kanoji shows up to Ichigo's house thinking that Ichigo is now his disciple. They end up having quite the feisty conversation through this discussion. However, Rukia senses a hollow coming from another direction and they end up just running towards the hollow's location. However, walking towards the direction of Ichigo is none other than Uryu Ishida. Upon arriving on one of the hollow is already missing, and it turns out that it was already executed, and that this had been happening all week, that someone else has been taking out all the hollows. After school that day, they once again went hollow hunting. However, this time around, the man that was killing all the previous hollows was around, and sensed a hollow nearby, shooting it through with the bow, turning to Ichigo and introducing himself as Uryu Ishida, a man who despises the Shinigami. After that night, Ichigo goes to school like any normal day, looking at the test scores when he hears about Uryu from Ohime. Ichigo freaks out, realizing that Uryu was in his class this whole time, and decides to follow Uryu around to learn more about him. However, the entire time Uryu was able to sense Ichigo, Uryu mentions how from the start of Ichigo gaining his powers, he has known about his Shinigami capabilities. Right after this, Uryu challenges Ichigo Kurosaki to a game to see whether Quincy or Shinigami are superior. While Ichigo is conversing with Uryu, Rukia Kuchiki visits Kisuke Urahara once again. She asks him about the Quincy and he talks about how the Shinigami exterminated them 200 years ago. A war broke out between the two sides, you see. While the Shinigami purified the hollows, the Quincy exterminated their resistance. This was more than a view change. The Quincy's wanted to avenge their friends and family that got murdered, but it caused their extermination. Meanwhile, Uryu challenges Ichigo to a game, and Ichigo accepts. However, he was unaware of the rules. As Ichigo crushes this hollow bait to lure in hundreds of hollows, he then explains the rules and how the one who kills the most hollows wins. Ichigo was worried about everyone, but Uryu insisted that he could handle them. But before Ichigo could stop it, he had already crushed the bait, so there was no recalling it. Ichigo immediately rushes to Karin since hollows are drawn to those with high Ryatsu. As time passes, more and more hollows are flying left and right. Chad and Ohime are even able to sense the hollows a little bit. Ohime is currently just hanging around Tatsuki when they end up hearing a bunch of people screaming and run towards it. At the same time, Rukia is just talking with Kisuke when her device starts going off at an alarming rate. She freaks out and asks Kisuke what is going on. The response is unnatural. Meanwhile, Chad is just wandering around with some of his homies when a hollow jumps down and starts attacking Chad and his friends. Chad is unable to fully see the hollow but can see it in kind of like this blurry way. He quickly comes to a logical conclusion that the hollow is after him and runs away to keep the hollow from the defenseless. Through their run, the hollow sees Karin and attacks Karin, however Chad saves her as well. Chad is fighting the hollow by using Karin's eyes as she can see the hollow better than him. Karin's friends, which are around, do see Karin and they were worried, so they run towards her, not knowing that there was a soul-eating hollow behind them. Chad is nearly knocked out on the floor from the hollow when we receive a flashback. Chad was a guy that was in constant fights, using his fists to fight for himself. After saving him, we see his grandfather holding him, and says to himself that his big fists are not for hurting people, they are for protecting. That I have learned my lesson, now please give me the power. And as he says this, his arm transforms and it easily kills the hollow. After destroying the hollow, Chad immediately falls to the ground and converses with Karin while being injured. Meanwhile, at the school where Ohime and Tatsuki are just cleaning up, Ohime attempts to politely convince them to just leave as she had just seen the hollow. However, as the hollow disappears, Tatsuki has to leave to go change her clothes. Ohime tries to stop her, but it was too late. The hollow catches Ohime and shoots the stuff at their other friend Chizuru. The hollow takes control of Chizuru's body. It then explains the extent of their capabilities, and their entire class starts coming towards Ohime. The classmates are beating the defenseless girl as she begs them to stop. This is when Tatsuki appears fighting off the classmate. She apologizes to Ohime as she had not noticed the hollow. Unlike Ohime, Tatsuki can only see a blurry outline of the hollow, kind of like Chad. Tatsuki ends up fighting the hollow for quite some time until quickly losing to the hollow's abilities. Ohime rushes to help, but Tatsuki just kicks Ohime away. This is once again where we receive a backstory, but this time is an extension of Ohime's. She used to like her hair. In fact, her brother loved her long orange hair. It made her feel happiness. However, after joining junior high, a 9th grader bullied her and cut some of it with scissors. Ohime refused to tell her brother the truth. However, after his death, she was just all alone. This is until Tatsuki began to protect her. Because of this, she was able to grow her hair out again. Ohime comforts Tatsuki, even though Tatsuki is attacking her, and she says, "Don't cry. From now on, I will protect you." At this point, her hairpin begins glowing and transforms. For the first time, Ohime is angry, and she looks at the hollow and says, "I show no mercy to anyone who hurts Tatsuki." Her hairpin transforms into 6 fairy-like things called the Shun Rika, the 6 princess shielding powers. These flowers were born because of Ichigo. Quickly, they teach Ohime techniques. They teach her how to use her shield, and she does so as she's being attacked. She blocks the attack quite easily. Then, they teach her this healing ability, and she uses it on Tatsuki to save her. This causes her to begin to cry, however quickly she learns one more move. This move she is able to use to kill and defeat the hollow. Immediately after dealing with the hollow, Ohime passes out. Ohime wakes up next to Chad and Kisuke's shop. This is where Kisuke introduces himself to them. Meanwhile, the hollows are attacking and Ichigo and Uryu are beginning to get extremely tired. Rukia confronts Uryu, but to no avail does it change anything. Meanwhile, Ichigo just found Rukia, Uryu, and Kon, and instead of attacking Uryu, he goes after Kon. They bicker for a while until Uryu shoots an arrow saying he is Ichigo's opponent. So Ichigo turns to Uryu and shouts at him saying, "Rather than who can kill the most hollows, let's face each other now." As they're talking, they notice the strange cracks aligning with each other in the sky, and all the hollows running towards those cracks. Uryu runs off by himself to try and deal with them himself, but Ichigo stays back and talks to Rukia for a bit. He learns about the Quincy's extermination and how the Shinigami had to do it to avoid the collapse of the universe. Rukia continues to explain how an equal amount of souls must be maintained in the Soul Society at all times. Otherwise, the balance of the two changes, and this will undoubtedly lead to the destruction of both. The Soul Reapers are entrusted with keeping this balance, and they monitor the number of souls to maintain the balance between the universes. But then the Quincy's came in and completely destroyed the Hollow Soul, so the number of souls only increased in the world of the living. So when the Quincy's began to kill more Hollows, it caused life and death to mix together, which caused chaos. The Soul Society pleaded for them to stop, but they refused. Immediately, Ichigo ran towards Uryu. However, when he tells Uryu he knows his story, we find out that Uryu could care less about what happened. He said the reason why he hates the Shinigami is not because of that war, but because they killed his master. We learn that after the war, his master was constantly pleading with the Shinigami. So one day they left him all alone, surrounded by 5 hollows. If they had listened to his master's philosophy, he would not have been killed, and the Shinigami wouldn't have been there to save his master. Uryu says he wants to fight this battle alone to prove the strength of the Quincy. Ichigo, however, immediately kicks Uryu and says that his grandfather did not want to prove Quincy's were better than Shinigami, but he wanted them to fight together. As Uryu and Ichigo are kind of fighting amongst each other with words, they become surrounded by hundreds of hollows. This is when Ichigo tells Uryu how he was originally human, but how he has a purpose in killing the hollows, and that purpose is because the hollows killed his mother. He says he does the work of the Shinigami because he does not want anyone else to go through what he went through. Ichigo then says that he wants to protect as many people as he can. This actually convinces Uryu to work with Ichigo, and together they manage to fight a good amount of hollows. However, this is when a giant hole opens in the sky, and out of it is the biggest hollow Ichigo had ever seen. This is when Kisuke appears and has his subordinates deal with the small hollows. Kisuke tells Ichigo that they can handle the small hollows if he and Uryu focuses on the Menos Grande. Ichigo and Uryu both attempt to defeat the hollow, but the Menos Grande just is far too powerful. As Ichigo is kicked back, Uryu accidentally touches Ichigo's sword. Pause. And his bow becomes way bigger. It is here where Uryu discovers that Ichigo's Ryatsu was pouring into him, so he asks Ichigo to touch him with his sword. Anyway, the giant hollow is charging what is known as a Sero, and Ichigo decides to not listen to Uryu and just charge in once again. Ichigo actually manages to use his Ryatsu to deflect the blast and hit the Menos Grande, which causes the Menos Grande to go in retreat. After Ichigo used his Ryatsu, he was unable to control it as his Ryatsu was no longer stabilized, and because of that, he collapsed and was going to die. This was until Uryu came in, touched Ichigo, pause and started shooting his arrows above him. If he stole enough of Ichigo's energy, he could force Ichigo's Ryatsu to then stabilize and save Ichigo's life. And even though while he was doing it, his arms were being torn to shreds, he still continued, and in fact, he saved Ichigo's life in that moment. This chapter then ends with a message to Central 46. The message is, locate missing personnel and criminal. Tosho Bureau, Squad 13. Rukia Kuchiki. The next day, we see two Shinigami immediately dispatched from the Soul Society to capture or kill Rukia Kuchiki. Meanwhile, Ichigo is already out of school when Uryu shows up covered in bandages, saying he fell down the stairs. Ichigo then invites Uryu to lunch and they eat lunch together. They end up verbally fighting with each other a little bit, and this all happens while Rukia is on a tree, looking at the sky, looking saddened. She is invited to eat lunch with the girls from her class. We then go back to Kisuke, where Kisuke is talking to a talking cat, and the talking cat's name is Yoichi. And Yoichi tells Kisuke that they are here. Later that night, Rukia leaves Ichigo a note saying thanks for everything, as she runs away, with two Shinigami above her saying that they have found her. As Rukia runs, she remembers her life in the world of the living. She recalls her experience with the people at school. She talks about how friendship, affection, and jealousy are not necessary for a Shinigami, and it just makes it harder to leave. She looks saddened as she runs. But then one of the other Shinigami, Renji Abarai, jumps down swinging his Zanpakuto at Rukia. Barely, Rukia manages to dodge it. Renji then demands Rukia for the location of the guy she transferred her powers to. This is where Rukia's brother, Captain Kuchiki, arrives. Rukia then evades more attacks from Renji, however Renji claims that he was allowing her to evade them, and if she does not tell him where the human is right now, he will cut her for real. Before he can do so though, Uryu Ishida steps in, shooting his arrows to protect Rukia. Meanwhile, Ichigo discovers Kon taped behind the toilet, who shows Ichigo a letter from Rukia. The letter's big message is in code, however once Ichigo decodes the letter, it says, "I must go. Don't look for me and don't worry about me. Burn this letter after you read it, and if you can, stay hidden for a while." This is where Kisuke Urahara appears and knocks Ichigo's soul out of his body so that Ichigo can be a Shinigami and go save Rukia. Meanwhile, Uryu has now been defeated by Renji, and as Renji goes in for the finishing blow, Ichigo shows up. It takes a while, but Renji figures out who Ichigo is and calls Ichigo the man who stole Rukia's powers. Ichigo and Renji fight for a bit when Renji has Ichigo slightly injured. Renji talks to Byakuya, and Byakuya reveals that 33 hours ago Ichigo defeated a Menos Grande. This causes Renji to laugh and ask Ichigo what his Zanpakuto name is. When Ichigo is confused, Renji laughs, saying you can't even ask your Zanpakuto its name, then saying, "How? Zabimaru!" Suddenly his Zanpakuto transforms in this long sword with one massive spike, followed by gaps with medium-sized spikes in between. Ichigo prepares to block, but then the Zanpakuto extends itself almost like a whip, and Renji's able to dig deep into Ichigo's shoulder tissue, nearly killing Ichigo in a single blow. As Renji goes in for a killing blow, Rukia attacks Renji to get him off his balance, giving Ichigo a chance to recover and run away. Except Ichigo did not run away. Instead, he released a massive amount of Ryatsu and started to turn the tables on his fight against Renji. As Ichigo then goes in for his own finishing blow against Renji, his Zanpakuto gets broken in half. Not by Renji, but by Byakuya Kuchiki, which was far away. Byakuya was so fast that Ichigo did not even see it happening. Byakuya then pulls out his own Zanpakuto and cuts Ichigo, forcing him to fall to the ground. Byakuya looks at Ichigo falling and tells Ichigo that he is slow even to fall. Rukia freaks out, trying to rush to Ichigo, however Renji stops her. Renji saying, "If you touch him, then they will add 20 years to your sentence." Rukia does not care though. She says that he gave his life for her. Byakuya then looks at Rukia, saying that he understands. This child looks very much like him. Ichigo then, with all the strength that he has left, grabs a hold of Byakuya's robe, barely living, struggling to breathe. This is where Rukia kicks his hand off, yelling at him to know his place. She then looks at her brother and says, "Take me to the Soul Society," and that she will humbly pay for her crimes. Rukia then convinces Byakuya not to finish Ichigo off, and as Ichigo cries out to Rukia, Rukia looks at him and says, "Be still. Move 1 inch from there, try coming after me, and I will never forgive you." As they leave, we learn that Byakuya shared his soul body's vitals, so that even if he does not die, he will have no more powers to work with anyway. Renji then opens the portal to the Soul Society, and they leave. As Ichigo lays there, they're unable to move, and he cries out. Lucky for Ichigo, Kisuke had been able to save him that night, and helps seal Ichigo's wounds. Almost immediately, Ichigo asks about Uryu, as it turns out Uryu was worried about Ichigo. This shocked Ichigo, but it turned out it was because Uryu believed that Ichigo was the only one who could save Rukia. Ichigo freaks out, not even knowing how to begin, when Kisuke offers Ichigo a deal. If Ichigo let Kisuke train him for 10 days, then he will send him to the Soul Society. It takes Ichigo a minute, but he eventually accepts the deal.
L is for lovers who love one another. A is for ass, of which I like to eat. U is for you're the only one for me. G is for the only gamer I see. H is for happy, I always feel it when you put them together. What do you get? Put them together. What do you get? What do you get? What do you get?